Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Dan Kovan. I am the Executive Director of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association. Today is our next installment in our virtual training series where we're going to be covering Precinct Committeeperson training. And we're going to be joined by our presenter, Bill Houlihan, here in a couple of seconds. Before we get into the training, first wanted to say Happy Juneteenth to everyone, a day late, but wanted to pass it along, and also Happy Father's Day to everyone tomorrow, a little early. Thank you for participating in today's training. The committee person role, I feel, is the lifeblood of the Democratic Party and is vital to our successes in November. So we're honored to be doing this training with Bill today, and I'm very grateful that each of you is taking a couple minutes out of your day today to get into this to learn more. A couple of things before I introduce Bill, just to be mindful for everyone. The training is going to last about an hour. So I ask everyone's going to be muted during the entire training. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them in the chat box below. And we will get to as many of them as we can. Also, be respectful of everyone's comments or questions. We have a wide range of people who are participating, from somebody who has 30+ years experience to somebody who's just recently elected. There's no stupid questions, so please be respectful of that. And again, be present during the training. It's going to be about an hour, so if you need to get up, go get a glass of water, go to the restroom, please go ahead and do that. Also, don't worry about if you can't take notes really quickly on this. We're going to be recording this video and posting it to our YouTube page probably early next week. So you'll be able to log into that and be able to see all of the training that we went through today. Everyone also should have received the training materials. I sent those out yesterday. If you haven't, please send me an email and I will get those out to you. Those include the committee person card and a letter that Bill uses that he'll get into once we start with that. But if you don't have it, please let me know. So I will introduce our presenter. It's Bill Houlihan. He is the 18th Congressional District State Central Committeeman. He's also the State Director for U.S. Senator Dick Durbin and has been helping out the County Chairs Association for many years with our training and is our go-to person for committee person training. So with that, I will kick it over to Bill and have you take it from there.
Thanks, Dan. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everyone's having a nice Juneteenth Father's Day weekend. I am serving my 19th term as Precinct Committeeman. I did 2 years when I was a student at Eastern Illinois, and I've been a committeeman, elected committeeman in Sangamon County, Capital 60, Capital 126, and now Capital 86, now for 18 terms. How did I first get interested in doing this? In 1983, I was working for this Illinois Senate Democrats for Phil Rock. He was the Illinois Senate President. Chuck Percy was the United States Senator from Illinois. And the Democrats just about got him in 1978, but with a guy by the name of Alex Seath, probably really showing how old I am by saying that. But we had, in 1983, we had several candidates that were interested, one being my boss, Phil Rock, Paul Simon, who was a congressman from Southern Illinois, Roland Burris, who was the state comptroller, and Alex Seath was running again. So I went and met with my precinct committeeman in Capital 60 and said, hey, I work for Phil Rock. He's running for United States Senate. I hope you can support him as a committeeman, and I'd be willing to help circulate your petition while I'm circulating Senator Rock's petition. He said, I've heard good things about Phil Rock. I think I could do that. So about a week, 10 days went by, and I was out getting signatures, came back home, and my next door neighbor, my across the street next door neighbor, came over, Linda, and said, the Democrat precinct committeeman was just at my house, and I didn't sign the petition he was carrying for United States Senate because it wasn't this one I signed for you. It wasn't Phil Rock's. It was Paul Simon's. And I said, boy, that's interesting. He told me he was for Phil Rock. So I called him on the phone and asked him what was up. Why were you doing that? Why didn't you give me a call to let me know? And he said, well, I was talking to some guys and they think Paul Simon has a better chance. And I said, well, I can understand why you feel that way. He's a downstater and everything else. But you should have talked to me. He said, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, I'm going to run against you for Precinct Committeeman. He said, you are? And I said, yeah, I am. So I went out and knocked on every Democrat door in my precinct, and I got 79 signatures for committeeman. I needed 10. He turned in 10. I sent a thank you note to everybody that signed my petition. And then after the first of the year, I knocked on their doors 2 more times. He delivered something to their house the last weekend of the election. When the votes were counted that night, I had 73 and he had 9. He was no longer the precinct committeeman. I tell that story because if you've developed a relationship in your neighborhood with your Democrats, they're not going to turn you out for somebody that's run against you. But you've got to develop that relationship. So the Democratic county chairman came to me and said, how did you do that? How did you beat him so badly? And asked me if I would put it down on paper. And that's when I designed this card in 1983, 84. And it's really simple. Things have changed quite a bit since then. I think the outline of it is what we still need to do, but we got some better tools. For example, Vote Builder. We didn't have Vote Builder back in the 1980s. If you wanted to get a precinct list, you went to your county clerk, you got it. And what I used to do is if you were a Democrat, I highlighted your name in green. If you were a Republican, I highlighted your name in red. If you were independent, I highlighted your name in yellow. And I went out and talked to my Democrats first, and then I talked to my independents. Rarely did I talk to a Republican. I'll tell you why. Because a Republican is no different than any one of us that's on this training. Rarely do we vote for a Republican. Rarely does a Republican vote for a Democrat. 96% of the people that voted in primaries across the country in 2016 voted for, that were Republicans, voted for Donald Trump for president. 98% of the Democrats that voted in the 2016 Democrat primaries across the country voted for Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, if you expect to get a Republican vote, you've got to talk to them quite a bit to get them to vote your direction. So I would talk to Republicans in my precinct, that I knew personally. Maybe they went, worked in the Capitol building. I knew them from the neighborhood, developed a relationship. My kids played Y soccer with them or something like that. And I would talk to them. But it takes a lot of time to get them to change. And you don't have a lot of time. Now, I tell you that because I think it's important in this day and age, and we'll talk about what we have to do with the COVID. But if it wasn't COVID, we got to start getting out earlier. The old rule of thumb in the 80s and 90s was, if you started knocking on doors the second to last weekend in September, you could get everything done. Well, today now you can vote early and you can vote by mail you don't need an excuse. You just can vote. That happens 40 days before the election. We're going to be able to start turning in under the new vote by mail law on August. You can start turning them in. Some county clerks are accepting them now, but on August 1st, they can take them. And then after they certify the ballot, they'll mail them out. So that means you got to get out and start talking to people. In the 2018 election, we had 4.2 million people vote in Illinois. 4.2 million people voted. Of that, 400,000 voted by mail. 1.4 million, voted early. They voted before Election Day. So we had 1.8 out of 4.2 million people vote before Election Day. So that means we had 2.4 million people vote on Election Day. So it's about 56% to 44% of people that vote early or vote by mail that vote on Election Day, which means you got to get out there, as I said earlier. Now we changed the law in Illinois that Governor Pritzker signed this last Tuesday that is going to say anybody that voted in 2018 general election, anybody that voted in a municipal election in 2019, anybody that voted in the Democrat or Republican primary in 2020, anybody that is registered to vote prior to August 1st will all get a vote by mail application. That's 4.2 million people are going to get applications to vote by mail. They are projecting that 2 million people will vote by mail right now, the State Board of Elections. Now, in the presidential election, the turnout's going to be much higher. It was the turnout in 2018 when J.B. Pritzker was elected governor was 59%. They're saying that the turnout's going to be somewhere between 72 and 74%. We're going to have an increase of about 15% over the people that voted in 2018. We're going to have 1 million more voters in 2020 than we had in 2018. So it's important to know that they're going to get this and they're going to send it back in. People are going to vote. It's only for the 2020 election. If it goes well, I believe the legislature will take it up and pass it. But those are the categories. You voted in 2018, you voted in the 2019 municipal election, you voted in the 2020 primary or general election, or you got registered to vote in 2020, you will get an application. That doesn't mean you can't carry applications around with you or mail them to other voters in your precinct, but you can do that. But they're going to get them, and you want to be able to follow up with them. So the vote by mail is really, really an important part. So I'd mark my list, green, red, yellow, and I'd go out and knock on doors. And you know, you want to be able, when you go out and knocking on doors, as a first-time precinct committeeman, I put a little bio together. I had my name and my wife's, where we worked, what kind of things, how many kids we had, where my wife and I both went to school, and gave that to these new Democrat voters and general election voters. And I had my phone number on there. Now I have my phone number, my cell number on there, as well as my email address, so that people can take a look at it. If they have any questions, I tell them to call me. So when we're talking about the vote by mail, our goal as precinct committeemen is to turn every Democrat and plus voter out in our precinct. Our goal isn't to turn every vote out. Our goal is to turn out every Democrat and plus voter. So if I get a call from a known Republican in the precinct and they say to me, "Hey, Bill, can you get me an application to vote by mail?" And I say 753-6740. And they said, "What's that?" I said, "That's the county clerk's office. You call them and you can get an application." I'm not giving a Republican an application. And if I'm really feeling pretty good about myself that day, I may tell them that, you know what, folks? President Trump changed the election from November 3rd to Thursday, November 5th. So Republicans vote on Thursday this year. I would do something like that. I would say, so, I'm kidding though, of course, you know that. But I wouldn't help a Republican get a vote that's going to vote against us. Some of you may feel differently. I think that's what our number one goal is as a precinct committeeman, getting people to vote Democrat in our neighborhood and getting plus voters, the independent voters. So you knock on their door and you say, "Hi, I'm Bill Houlihan. I'm your precinct committeeman. I'm your Democrat precinct committeeman. How's it going, Ellen?" "Good. Want to let you know that we got some really good candidates running in the 2020 election. We got a great congressional candidate that's running in the 13th district named Betsy Londrigan. She lost by less than a percentage point. She has been working very hard ever since that election. Can I count on you to support her?" And you're looking them in their face, in their eyes, to see if they're going to say, "Yes, I can," or "No, I don't know yet. I need more information." Well, you put that down. But that's the, you know, you want to be able to ask that question. You want to give them information. You want to talk to them about Joe Biden, who's running for election. You want to talk to them about Dick Durbin, who's running for re-election for United States Senator. And you want to talk to them about a local candidate. That could be a Betsy Londrigan. That could be a Kevin McGuire, who's running for county board. That could be a Mike Drake who's running for state's attorney in Sangamon County. You can mention that, but you've got to follow up that question after you ask them about that candidate. Can you count on their support on election day? Then as you walk away, you mark your list. And with Vote Builder, you can go in, you can do it on your phone if you so happen to want, or when you get back home, you can do it on your list. You can mark your list and then put the data in there. I always tell people that if something happens, you want to be able to write that down on your list too. Maybe the dog got out when they first opened the door. Maybe they told you they couldn't talk to you because they were having a birthday party for their daughter. I write that down. The next time I knock on their door, I would say, how was that birthday party? Or I would say, how's your dog doing? That is solidifying that relationship with that individual, because they want to know that you're interested in what they think. And we are, because we want to get a relationship with them so that they end up deciding to vote the way we want them to vote, especially the Democrats, especially the independents. So I mark my list, I go do what I have to do, and I continue to go back. The difference between a Democrat voter and an independent voter is just not going to do it by one knock on the door. They're going to need other things. They need to maybe get a piece of mail, maybe 2 pieces of mail from the candidate. They may need to see a sign in a neighbor's yard. They may need to hear a radio or TV commercial, and all those things make a difference. Now, when I go out door to door, I have a letter. And on the front side of the letter is every Democrat that I support. And I give that to every neighbor in my precinct that I'm going to knock on their door. So when you give them that, that gives them who you're thinking about. It's got the polling place. It's got my cell number. It's got my email address. It also has the candidates that I've endorsed, and it has the polling place. On the back side is the sample ballot. This is the ballot. The county clerk in your county has to have a sample ballot for every precinct in the county. Every precinct in the county. And you can go down and get that. It's supposed to be ready mid-August. It'll be ready right around the same time they certify the ballot, mid-August to late August. And you get that, and I fill in the ovals of all the Democrats. And I put on it on the bottom that election law allows you to take this with you to the voting booth. Now, I fold it in half, and if I have literature for the candidates, I put their literature in there. If I don't, I just go ahead and present the letter. Now, in the primary election, I got around to some houses. I didn't get around to all of them. The COVID was starting to come out, and I ended up mailing this to the voters in my precinct, saying that I'm for Joe Biden, Dick Durbin, and the Senate and all the delegate candidates, and myself for Precinct Committeeman. In my precinct against Bernie Sanders in March, it was still considered quite a close race, but Biden was starting to trend in the positive. 72% of the vote he got in my precinct. Biden did over Bernie Sanders. And all the Biden delegates won my precinct. So I really strongly believe in this letter is very helpful, especially once you develop a relationship with the people in your neighborhood that you went out and worked. So you mark your list, you put down anything pertinent that you remember, you keep that ongoing list so when you knock on their door again, you can talk to them about it. If they sign a petition for a candidate, mark your list so you know that, so you can thank them when you're there talking to them about the upcoming election, that, you know, part of the reason that we got a candidate running for the county board or for state's attorneys because you signed a petition to get them on the ballot. So thank you for that. So this is what you need to do. You need to be prepared. I always tell people that they should plan on figuring 8 to 10 weekends, you know, and I'm not looking for a bunch of weekend time. What I'm looking for is you're going to go out on Saturday, maybe 2 to 4. And if you go out 2 to 4 and you get 25 good contacts, And if I leave this letter and they're not home, I put their names on it and I say, sorry, I missed you. I will talk with you soon about the upcoming election. Call me if you have any questions. And sign my name again. So those are little tricks that you can do to get people involved. So if you do all this that I talk about, then comes election day. And election day is really, really important. Is it as important as it was in the 80s and 90s? It's still very important, but with so many people voting early and so many people voting by mail, we've got to know our game. So before, during, and leading up to election day, once the 40 days out where you can vote by mail and you actually get a ballot, and this is the law on getting a ballot. Once your application gets turned in and they get they get the first large number of ballots in the mail, everyone after the first day that they receive, they have 2 business days to get the ballot back out. And they mail the ballot back out. In my precinct, I check that list every day to find out when they got the ballot mailed, and and then I check it to make sure they return it or I return it for them. In the new law, it's going to allow every county clerk in the state election authority to set up drop boxes where you can drop these. They'll be like mailboxes, but you won't have to pay postage, and you can drop them in that box. They may be at the county building, they may be at other different post offices around. They're trying to work all those, the state board's trying to work all that out, but they can do it. Otherwise, you have to mail it back in. And like I said, if a Republican wants me to mail their ballot back in, they're really, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put the postage. I won't even tell them where a post office box is to mail it. But I'll make sure that if it's a Democrat, I have extra stamps on me when I'm going door to door, and I'll put the postage on there for them to make sure it goes out. Also under this law, and you can do it before, but they codified it in the election law, you can take people's ballot into the election authority for them before election day. So I, as a precinct committeeman, or I as a volunteer, if the voter says, I give permission to Bill Houlihan to take this ballot to the election authority, and they sign it, I can take it, and they don't have to do postage that way either. So this new law, get to know it. I know it's been mailed out. The analysis has been mailed out to all the county chairs in the state. I would get it. If not, I'm sure Dan, anybody that's been on these last couple of weekends trainings can do it. So this is the big ask from Dan Kovatz and Bill Houlihan. If you're going to do this work in your neighborhood and you're going to work a couple hours for 8 or 10 weekends, you have to take election day off. You've got to make a commitment today to say, I will take election day off and I'll be in and around my polling place on election day. That doesn't mean you got to be there from 6 in the morning until 7 at night, but you should be there the high times, 6 to like 8:30, 9 o'clock, 11 to about 1:30 while people come and vote around lunchtime, and then 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. You got to have a credential. And in my precinct, I stand most of the time I'm there. So as you come in, as you know, you go in polling places, they usually have a 7 or 8 foot table with all the election judges at it. And then either off to the side, they'll have spots for the poll watchers, which a precinct committeeman can be a poll watcher, as well as they have a credential. A credential allows you to be in the polling place. You get it from a candidate or from your county chair. And you want to make sure you have several credentials on election day. And I greet every voter that comes in. I've been precinct committeeman in the precinct I'm living in now since 1996, 24 years. And I know just about every voter in the precinct by first name, even the Republicans. I know them because they come there, we see them in the area, they see me walking around. But I look and shake hands with everybody that comes in the polling place. And I thank them for voting. And one more time, I look in their eyes so they know what I'm talking about. I'm thanking them for voting Democratic. That's what I'm really saying to them when I grab their hand and talk to them for 10 seconds. I see people in the polling place bringing this with them, and they pull it out of their purse or they pull it out of their pocket, and that's how they end up voting. Because a lot of them don't know all the candidates, and they're looking for help, and once they develop a relationship with you. So if you agree to work hard and work smart, then you got to make sure that you do this. You take that day off and you're there. Get to know your election judges prior to that, because in case you go, they can tell you a little bit about what will happen. They can mark your list as long as it does not impede the process of the election. Now, I tell this every time I do the training. I have a Republican precinct committeeman. This is the 4th Republican precinct committeeman I have. And she is 84 years old. She ran in 2014 for the first time and got elected. The Republicans were having a county chair fight. She was on the, she had just retired from the county board. She was a known commodity. The other person was going to vote for the other candidate. So she ran. And so we're talking on election morning, and she says, you know, Bill, I said, Mary Frances, I can't believe you took this job. And she said, I took this job to be precinct committeeman, and I told them that I would not knock on one door. And I said to Mary Frances, I hope you're precinct committeeman for many, many years. Because if she's not knocking on doors, and I am, I've got a chance to win people over. And what she gives out is she fills up one of those Vote Republican doggy bags with everyone's literature and pays a couple kids to deliver them through the precinct. There's no substitute for contact and talking to people direct. So let's talk about the big thing that's going on in America today, COVID-19. So, you know, we're in phase 3. We just selected a couple candidates to run in Sangamon County for offices that we didn't have a candidate before the election. And we went out and got signatures for those candidates after they were nominated and then voted on by the Central Committee. Now, you got to do it a little bit different. And like I said, you got to think smart. And what I did was I called people and said, I'm going to be in your neighborhood on this street, and this street between 2 and 4. I'll come by, I can leave the clipboard, or I'll have a mask on, and I would need you to sign the petition for so-and-so candidate. And I did that. I was able to get 50 signatures in 17 days. 50 Democrats signed those petitions. Because once they get to know you, they're willing to sign it. But I had a mask on. I had wipes in the car. I wiped the pen off after everybody that signed and then went to the next house. I thought, you know, you can call people once they get to know you and they could do it. We don't know what it's going to be like in the fall, but I think it's going to be probably iffy on how many actual doors and how maybe people won't open the door, depending on their age, if they're in the vulnerable category or whatever. So you've got to really get a sense of what your precinct is and what you think you have to be able to do. So I would take that very seriously. So what other things can you do? Well, you can call people. You know, you should have, you know, Vote Builder has about 75% of their phone numbers. You can call them, introduce yourself as the precinct committeeman if you've been the committeeman for a while, and let them know. You can mail out the letter to them before you call them. You can do social media. If you have email addresses, you can go ahead and contact them that way. You can set up chats in your neighborhood and things like that. And that's what you have to do. You got to think creatively and outside the box if you're going to be able to do this. Because I'm not sure how many doors we're going to be able to really knock on come this fall. Now, on the chase part of the vote by mail ballots, we got to make sure that we get those Democrat ones in. So every night, the county clerks from throughout the state will send to the State Board of Elections everybody that they mailed a ballot out to and who returned a ballot. And that will go into Vote Builder early in the morning that you're going to be able to see if you're signed up for Vote Builder as a precinct committeeman. So you're going to be able to keep track of that. If you're a candidate, I would say that's a real important list for you, especially those folks that are Democrats and independents, so that you get them, talk to them beforehand. Once they get the ballot, they have some literature on you. You've got a chance to get them to vote for you. But we call it the ballot chase. We're still trying to figure out with the county chairs, other candidates, how we're going to best do the chase on this, so we're not all falling over each other. So if we have a precinct committeeman that's going to take care of their precinct, then we could put other volunteers other places where we may not have that. But the ballot chase is something you should be talking about and thinking about what your plan is for the 2020 election. So you take off election day, you're there all day, and as you're there, you know, you're talking to people, you're looking at your list. And my list comes from Vote Builder. My list is everybody that I've identified as a Democrat or an independent voter or a Republican that's got some sense now that is deciding to vote for a Democrat. So I will go ahead and talk, they will be on my list. That's the list that I marked from. Now my Republican precinct committeeman, she's got the standard list. And she says to me, well, your list is a lot different than mine. I said, well, there's a lot of people on your list that I hope don't show up, because I want to make sure my people do. And that's my goal, is to get everybody on my list to vote election day that haven't voted early and voted by mail. So I've got a guy that's been a great voter. His name's Jimmy. He's lived in my precinct before I lived here. Jimmy works for the Secretary of State's office. I can go to his house with 10 petitions. He'd sign every one of them. I could send him an invite to a fundraiser. He'll write a check. I mean, I could go by and say, hey, can I put 2 or 3 signs in your yard? He says, yes. He always votes before he starts work. He starts work at 7 o'clock. So this election back in 2016, he hadn't voted. And, you know, I'm thinking, that doesn't sound like Jimmy. So I'm in and out around. Now it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I talk to my Democrat judge as I say, look up Jimmy again, see if he's voted. Jimmy hadn't voted. So I get on the phone and call Jimmy. I said, Jimmy, when are you going to get down here? He said, Bill, I've already voted. I said, Jimmy, I said, I just saw the sheet. You know, you haven't voted yet. And he said, Bill, I voted. I said, okay. So I let it go for a while, went back, waited a while, talked to the election judge again. She said, no, he hasn't voted. And we're not getting any more vote by mail. So I call him again. I said, Jimmy, you know, you haven't voted. You haven't voted by mail. You haven't voted early. You haven't voted in person. He said, Bill, I voted. I said, Jimmy, do me a favor. He said, what's that? I said, come vote for a second time today. He came and voted. He hadn't voted. He was just having a bad day. But I was able to talk to him like that because I've been his committeeman for 24 years. And he came and voted. After he voted, he asked me to come over and talk to him by the door. And he said, thanks for staying on my butt, because I probably wouldn't have made it today. And he was there to vote for Hillary Clinton and Tammy Duckworth. You know those things once you become a precinct committeeman and you know the voters in your neighborhood. I don't think we're going to have an election where people want to stay home in 2020. I think we're going to have a tremendous turnout. But we've got to do our job beforehand to make sure that we get the number of people out that we really need. That's my pitch. I want to appreciate what you're going to do over the next, 137 days left to election day. I do want to say, if you decide to follow the model that's been laid out here, I would go back and look at the 2016 results on how many votes Duckworth got for senator and her Republican opponent, how many votes Hillary got and Donald Trump in your precinct. Write those numbers down, put it on a 3x5 card, stick it in your purse or wallet, and then write those, and then get the numbers from election day. Because if you do what we discussed today, you're going to see a 3 to 5% increase in the Democrat vote in your precinct.
All right, thanks, Bill. We're starting to get some questions in here. So again, folks, If you have questions, please drop them in the chat box below, and we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. One that I know that's popped up a couple of times is Vote Builder Access. The County Chairs Association, we work with each of the county parties, or I should say most of the county parties, on Vote Builder Access. Elected and appointed precinct committee persons are allowed to get access to Vote Builder, but you have to request it through your county chair. So if you don't have access and you're interested, get a hold of your chair and say that you want to get involved in this, you want to get access. With access also comes training, and that training is put on by the Democratic Party of Illinois. We'd be more than willing to send that information out to you. They run trainings on Tuesday and Thursday of every week, and it varies on what the trainings are. So a couple of questions here, Bill. How do you identify independent voters when most of the time we only see either Dem or Republicans for primary elections?
Good question. What I do how I do it is identify them as those people that do not vote in primaries, but do not miss general elections. So for example, they don't take a Democrat or Republican ballot in March, but they've got a history of voting in 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2020. 2020 this year. So I would say that's who I put in the independent column. The other group that I put in the independent column, if there ends up being an equal, they voted in one Democrat primary, one Republican primary, and the rest were general elections, then I would put them in the independent category. Since they voted Democrat once and Republican, I would go talk to them. That would be my my group of independents that I put. Now, there's a fourth group that we really didn't talk about at all, and those are newly registered voters. I also put them in with the new, if someone registers to vote in 2020, more than likely they're going to vote in the 2020 election. A lot of other people register to vote and they don't. But if they have no voting history, I rarely, if ever, knock on their door. And you're going to be able to get that from Vote Builder.
Okay. Bill, you touched on a little bit with your election judges, and that's one of the responsibilities as an elected or appointed committee person. Can you kind of talk about what that responsibility is and what role we play with the selecting and appointing election judges?
Yeah, so election judges, every precinct has to have 2 or 3 Democratic judges, depending on how the gubernatorial candidate has done in your precinct. And then you, as the precinct committeeman, elected or appointed, normally it's May, some counties do it in June. They send a list to you of people that were the judges in your precinct in the 2018 election. And you could submit those names that are Democrats, or you could find new people. If you submit their name and then rank them 1 and 2 on your list, then they will be the election judges for the next 2 years. The other folks can still remain to be election judges. They just may work in another precinct. They would go on to the supplemental list. It's really important. I ask my election judges to do a couple things, and that's it. I ask them to put a sign in their yard for a couple candidates that I support, and then I ask them the Sunday before election, I give each of them half the list of people that are on my plus and Democrat list that are going to vote on election day. And I ask them just to call them and remind them and ask them if they have any questions for me, and I would follow up with them. And the election judges do. And they tell them in their conversation that if they have any questions, they'll be at the polling place. They're the Democrat judge for our precinct. So it's very important. So then the county board's got to take it and adopt it, and then they're election judges for the next 2 years. So
Okay.
If you haven't got a letter from your county chair, you should ask them about it, and you should make sure you find somebody. There are so many people that want to do it. It's amazing, even in these sort of crazy times. When I first got elected precinct committeeman here in 1996, I put a letter out after the primary and said, If you're interested in being if you're interested in being an election judge, let me know. I had 10 people say they wanted to be a judge. That's a problem you really don't want, but it's nice to have so that you know there is so much interest. So I got the other ones on the supplemental list, and the 2 judges I've had right now, I think they both have 12, 14 years experience.
It's important to remember too, these are paid positions to serve as an election judge for that day, and they're vitally important. The Democratic Party of Illinois and the Democratic County Chairs Association, we're currently running a recruitment campaign statewide to recruit additional election judges because of what's going on with COVID. So please, if you haven't submitted your judges yet, if you're a committee person, please get them submitted to your county chair. We have until June 30th to submit our list to our chairs. That goes to the clerk. And then once that list is submitted to the clerk, the clerk can't move those people if we submit it before June 30th. After June 30th, then it's up to the clerk depending on where they need help. But it's important to get our judges in now. Especially, we know what the Republican game plan is for Election Day. It's going to be heavy on voter suppression. They've made that clear, and the campaign is broadcast that they are planning on trying to suppress votes. So we need to get our election judges in. Here's a good question for you, Bill. Since we do have a lot of appointed committee persons on today's training, what do you do in terms of building a relationship with folks that are actually not your neighbors if you were appointed to a different precinct in a different part of town?
I think it's more important with that you just let them know you're a volunteer for the Democrat Party, that you don't live in that precinct, but you wanted to be active, and they need to make sure they know who you are and how to get in touch with you. So I think that bio is really, really important if you're appointed precinct committeeman, especially if you do not live in the precinct. So I'd put that bio together. I'd get it out to them to let them know that you're an activist and you wanted to be involved. There was a precinct committee person in your precinct, but you took another precinct because you want to help the Democrats elect Joe Biden president of the United States. And they'll really buy into that.
Okay, and just remind folks again, keep the questions coming. We've got a couple more minutes here. So if you have any other questions, please drop them in the chat. One of the things that I think is valuable for the committee persons is talking not just about the candidates that we're working for, but the turning out of just the Democrats in the precinct. Can you talk, Bill, a little bit more about just how we turn out if we know these are our strong Dems? Like, how many times do we have to talk to them so that we know on Election Day those are the people that are going to show up as well?
Yeah, I try to get around to talk. I break my list. So when I first start going out door to door, I talk to Democrats and usually pass general election households or not strong Republicans. I try to give as much attention to those hardcore Democrats early, and with the plan of trying to get back to them. So 2 weekends left in the election cycle before Election Day, I try to get back by them again and just talk to them, not as long, but stop by. But I'd work your base early, then go after the general election voters, go after those not strong Republicans, and then go back to your base the last couple weeks.
Okay. Another question that popped up on vote by mail for postage. With the changes in the election law, does a voter need to pay for postage in order to mail in their ballots?
Well, that's a good question from the standpoint that in the election law that was signed by the governor, it says if there's no postage on it, they ask the letter carrier to deliver it to the election authority. That's in there. So there's a bill before Congress in Washington, the HEROES Act 4, that the Senate has been discussing, not really debating, but discussing in small groups. There will be money in there to reimburse county election authorities for returning the ballot. So that's what we're working on right now. But yes, I mean, if they mail it, there's no postage on it, the letter carriers, United States Post Office, are supposed to send the ballot.
Okay. I think that's all the questions we've had. Let me see here. Okay. All right, and just to clarify too, Bill, for our election judges, a committee person can't serve as an election judge. We can only serve as a poll watcher, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. And that way, we know we've got some places where we're short on election judges, but unfortunately, none of us who are elected or appointed PCs can serve in that role.
Now, Dan, there was a question that popped up on my screen just for a second that said the postage. The postage isn't for the application. The postage is for the ballot only. So we send the ballot out, and we send the application out. Then the application comes back to from my understanding, it's gonna come back to the State Board of Elections. The State Board of Elections is then gonna send it to the election authority. Then when the ballot goes out, it'll go out from the election authority or Sangamon County Clerk, and then you mail it back to them on their pre-printed. Yeah, someone just asked if they can request applications. Yes, you can. So, but it's got to look just like the one that the county clerk now. So if you got a Democrat county clerk, they probably would be willing to give you a lot. If you got a Republican county clerk, we got this guy that lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue that believes that vote by mail is fraudulent, even though he votes that way. But you can get it, even if you get one or two. I'd go to your local headquarters or go somewhere, not a government office, of course, and copy them so that you have copies of them. I walk around when I go door to door with about 20 applications with me.
Okay. If a committee person is appointed, can they also serve then as a voter registrar?
Yeah, their name just needs to be turned into the county clerk by their county chair, and yes, they can register voters.
Okay. And we've got a couple different ways with that, not just the motor voter form, but we can do online voter registration as well as other options. Do you want to talk a little bit about the voter registration stuff?
So the voter registration has changed a lot. I mean, so we have what's called same-day registration. So we'll have that in all of our counties on election day. Depending on the size of your county, a lot of the smaller counties make you go to the county building to register and vote there. Where in the little bit larger counties, they put them in areas where they've got several polling places and you can register there. Us as precinct committeemen can go and register people to vote. There's the automatic voter registration law that Senator Andy Menard got passed a few years back. So if you get state services, you get a driver's license, those kind of state ID, they automatically, you're registered to vote. And if you're already registered to vote, it's a change of address if you've moved. So you have all those. And then you can go up to 28 days before the election. You can go to the county building and get registered to vote if you wish. We as precinct committeemen, deputy registrars, have to have all our materials turned in 27 days before. So then once that happens, then they have a voter registration period where you can go to the county building. And then we have on election day, same day registration, where you have to bring 2 pieces of identification. You can register there and then vote.
Okay, go ahead. If we have any last second questions here, we're gonna wrap up again. Okay. Want to thank everyone for joining us today and going through this training. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please reach out to us. I'm going to I sent my email, or I put my email in the chat box. Let me go ahead and get it in there again. If you have any follow-up questions after today, please let me know and I will get them to Bill as well. We're going to post this video on YouTube probably next week. So if you have any other questions, follow up there. Make sure you also follow us on our social media. We're going to be pushing out a lot of information, not just on the election judge recruitment that I talked about, but additional trainings and additional things that we have that are coming up for the election. Messaging, help, fair tax, a lot of things that we're going to be heavily involved in. And somebody asked about the social media channels. If you go onto Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, just search Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association. We're going to pop up. You'll be able to get to it from there. Please check us out on there. And again, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.